in the Wall Street Journal by a former chief of staff to Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Josh Holmes is his name. Making the point I've been making on this show for some time.
Which point is that?
That Americans have not felt the full impact of the economic devastation that has been wrought by the response to the COVID-19 outbreak. They are in a period of hold harmless that is going to end soon, and it is going to fundamentally alter the calculus of tens of millions of Americans. As Josh Holmes writes, neither the stock market nor the political preferences of those who've been hit hardest by the COVID-induced economic crisis have fundamentally changed since the crisis began. Isn't that interesting?
Did you see the report out of University of Chicago yesterday? So 41 million people out of jobs. They claim 40% of job loss will be permanent. Permanent. They'll never get their job back.
40% of job loss will be permanent, says University of Chicago. A recent Washington Post poll shows 77% of those who lost their jobs believe they will be heading back to the same jobs following the crisis.
Not so.
People are deluding themselves. Why? Because they haven't felt the pain.
Right.
This has largely been an inconvenience, and for those for whom it has been more than an inconvenience, who have lost their jobs, their optimism is a bit unbounded, as this Washington poll survey indicates, and their delusion has been subsidized by the government, right? Because they haven't missed a paycheck yet through unemployment, and particularly the enhanced unemployment. So many more, particularly in the service industry, are making more money on unemployment than they were employed.
Right. NBC interviewed a woman who went back to work. Who admitted, she goes, I'd be making more being unemployed, sitting home right now, but I wanted to get back to work to do what I loved.
If your Josh Holmes writes, but this is the point. Josh Holmes, if your family hasn't lost a loved one to COVID-19, your bank account probably looks basically the same, and you believe your job is awaiting your return. If you believe all those things, if your account looks the same and you're awaiting, you believe your return is imminent, the 10 weeks have been an extended vacation associated with some inconveniences. And those that have been completely insulated, those who can easily telework, meaning mainly upper income professionals, a lot of them champagne socialists.
Mm-hmm. Who self-quarantined in their summer homes.
Right, exactly.
It's fantastic.
Which is why he goes back to say, hey, isn't it interesting that the numbers haven't moved? Trump's approval rating, according to Gallup, was 49% on February 16th. And 3 months after the largest job loss in American history, his approval rating is 49%. Same. And, of course, the opposition to Trump is also the same. And, frankly, the composition of the support and opposition is largely the same. It's remarkable. But it's because, in part, the volatility that is bubbling below the surface has been kept below the surface through $9 trillion worth of government disaster relief. And for those 40 million, at least in part because of that, and for the 40 million first-time unemployment filers over the last 9-10 weeks, many of whom are feeling it, you know who's feeling it because you know where you see them? At reopen rallies. You see a lot of them at reopen rallies, which is why you get a cross-section of people politically at those reopen rallies, and they're saying largely the same things.
Well, I met a couple yesterday who are in the service industry. They still haven't gotten an unemployment check yet.
Okay. Well, I mean, of course that's happening, particularly in Illinois. But the general point is that you have an expectation that everything is going to be smooth, and to the extent that you're being pinched right now because of incompetence, because you live in a state with incompetence, bloated, ineffective government like Illinois, you still expect that, you can plan for this money that's coming down the pike at some point. What if you don't have that assurance? Like when the payments stop, if there isn't a phase 4 check, when the enhanced unemployment benefits go back to the standard issue unemployment benefits, when your job doesn't return. Three-quarters of people think they're going back to their job.
They're not. My
Many
son
of them
Peyton's
are not.
He's like, when am I going to go back to work at Zia's? I'm like, not anytime soon. I mean, they have to reconfigure patio seating, but even that, he's not high on the list. They're going to bring back people who have families to support first.
And many of those businesses are also not guaranteed to reopen. Oh, by the way.
Yeah.
Particularly in the service sector, where there's projections of up to 1 in 4 restaurants that are gone forever. Now, ultimately, there may be new restaurants that come online as the economy recovers and so on and so forth. So, but I mean, that takes time. So are you in it for the next 6 months, for the next year?
312-642-5600 is our turnkey.pro answer line. 64636, type in DA, then a quick comment.
Holmes concludes this piece saying, unlike previous challenges, the true nature of America's economic crisis hasn't set in on the American people. I completely agree. When it does, the familiar political fault lines fused with millions more unemployed could make 2020 the most explosive ideological election in American history. Yeah, it could. I mean, do you get that sense that people haven't felt the full brunt of it? There was a lot more panic early on. It was a combination of things, and one sort of drives the other. But it was what the unknown nature of the virus and its lethality combined with dire worst-case scenario predictions that drove the stock market down, 40% in a short period of time. Now that you've seen essentially a 50% recovery, I mean, up near 26,000. It was 18,000 6 weeks ago, the Dow. So people are feeling a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more stable. We're going to be able to ride this out fine. There's no precipice just over the horizon. Maybe for some, maybe not for millions of others. I don't know how you look at unemployment rates like 21% in Illinois, 33% in Kentucky, and say, yeah, no, it's this looks pretty good. We should be fine.
Yeah, we did the thing. We stayed at home. We're heroes.
Well, and so this leads us to our next guest, Yoram Lass. He's a former director of Israel's health ministry, and he gave a compelling interview to Spiked Online. So I wanted to follow up with that. The top line being, nothing can justify this destruction of people's lives. And by the destruction of people's lives, he's talking about the implications of the lockdown approach to combating the COVID-19 outbreak. And again, all of the consequences that maybe we're just beginning to get a sense are going to be visited upon us in the West. For more on this, Yoram Lass, former director of Israel's health ministry, member of the Sackler Faculty of Medicine at Tel Aviv University. Yoram Lass, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
One of the points that you made right at the outset of the interview I referenced was about two viruses. One, COVID-19. The other, the social media networks. And that is a much discussed topic of late. But to just develop how you think the social media networks and the information flow through them exacerbated the incorrect response to the actual virus.
Well, this is the first epidemic in history which is accompanied by what you just mentioned, the social media virus, which had changed everything. You see, this corona situation is comparable to the seasonal flu epidemic. Comparable. In my country, it is 1/3, much smaller. In your country, it's comparable, say, to the Asian flu in the 50s or the Hong Kong flu in the 60s. Comparable, not the same. But then we did not have Facebook and Instagram and everything, which has changed everything. We have a mental illness, not only a body illness, but a mental illness. People and governments are hysterical. The response is hysterical. Monstrous hysteria is what we have. And the results and the cost is almost biblical. I mean, how can we ruin our own world with our own hands for something which is comparable to flu? The only answer I have is what I just told you.
Well, the snowball effect. So China shut down, and we saw the horrific images of people dying on the streets, and then, then Europe shut down, and then Israel shut down, and then the United States shut down. Sweden chose not to shut down. But why was it just a knee-jerk reaction to close it all down, or was there any? Why do we do that?
Well, as you just mentioned, it's a copycat. Everybody's copying others' policy. Take China. China is 1,400,000,000 people. They had only 3,000, later they updated to 4,000 people. What is 4,000 in such an enormous continent? Every year in China, at least 10 million people die from natural or disaster causes. So what is 3,000? But people became hysteric. This if you look in the media, this virus is it looks like an alien with those 50 antennas and the colors. And then you have this police state, so they shut down, they welded the doors. And everybody around the world saw this and became frightened. So it was a snowball effect from one country to another country for something, as I say, for the third time, for something which is comparable to a flu epidemic.
But what about all the medical professionals, whether they're medical doctors or public health professionals, the Centers for Disease Control folks here, you know who they are, epidemiologists and virologists and microbiologists the world over. I mean, there's certainly at minimum divided opinion about the response, many proposing and supporting the idea that locking down, in addition to all the other measures that don't have much of a basis in science, but the scientific professionals are suggesting make the most sense based on what we know. We're advocating for these policies too, and that provided the cover for the politicians.
Yeah, but look, I speak for myself and for the data I have, and for many professionals like myself who support the idea that lockdown is lunacy. The cost is much higher than the benefit. We only begin to feel the cost. I mean, take unemployment. Unemployment is mortality. Think about the depression, the suicide, the pressure, the high blood pressure, the heart attacks, the crime, the alcohol, the drugs, husbands killing wives. Think about all these results from unemployment. And the unemployment we have is a much greater danger than the corona
but
for human lives.
Look, I am in vociferous agreement with you, and I know you only speak for yourself, but I'm trying to see if you can help us understand why you have all of those professionals with all of those credentials, like you have those same credentials, saying something very different about lockdown policies. What should we understand about the industry of epidemiologists and public health professionals and government consultants?
Yeah. Okay. Let me give you an example, not from the United States. Professor Ferguson from Imperial College in London. So he and people like him, they come up with models, with exponential models. Now, models, they do not work in biology. There are too many variables in biology. Now, there is a history here. Back in 2009, we had the swine flu epidemic. Perhaps you remember that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Swine flu epidemic of 2009 originating from Mexico. No vaccine, very contagious. At least 250,000 people, if not more, died. And this Ferguson, back in 2009, he suggested a shutdown based on his crazy models. Nobody listened to him. Why? Because back in 2009, people were busy with the financial crisis of 2008. So they did not have the attention to listen to this nonsense.
Yeah.
Now, the same Ferguson, same guy, same big professor of 2009 failed. The same guy, he advised the British government 2019, and he succeeded. And you copied the English copied the Italians copied the French, and so on, and they all copied China, which is very exotic. Everything there is exotic. And we came to a point where the world economy is ruined for a very long time. You see, fear and anxiety is a mental situation which is very difficult to treat. People are afraid.
So
for many months and years now.
So is what I'm here? Let me see. Just take your temperature on this statement. You know, all these public health professionals who've been plying their trade for decades, like Neil Ferguson at Imperial College London, like Tony Fauci at the CDC. They're all part of sort of a fraternity. You know, they all meet at World Health Organization meetings and so on and so forth. So they're a bit of an echo chamber. And the echo chamber begets the domino effect that you're describing.
Yeah, well, I agree. And also, I mean, look at the simple numbers. The simple numbers show to you. Take your country. 330 million Americans. They are still alive, aren't they? And you behave, the world behaved, like we're dealing here with the Black Death of the medieval area where half of the population was killed by a bacteria, by the way, not by the virus, by a bacteria. It's not something which exterminate populations. In your country, 2.8 million Americans die every year. The numbers are very big, and in big and serious flu situation, this is the number you get in the corona season.
Right.
And it does not justify the destruction of human lives, human economy, and the anxiety of people. it does not justify that.
Right. And I think there's been a lot of irresponsible rhetoric going on. I mean, we have an epidemiologist in Illinois who's just so, your summer's canceled, you're never going swimming, you're not going on vacations. But for epidemiologists, this is their Super Bowl. They've waited their whole careers to have a pandemic.
Right.
And that's what
Right.
I think fuels the fire.